One of the things which became clear to me as an adult was that all of the nursery rhymes and fairy tales and traditional stories were ways for adults to package their wisdom and pass it down to the next generation over the course of centuries. Aesop's fables contained embedded moral lessons, some obvious to me and some a little more opaque. I'm certain that these stories had a very significant effect on the formation of my character, and I'm very grateful that I was introduced to them as a child. The Brothers Grimm published collections of European folklore, which often contained warnings and instruction for children. Tales like Cinderella, Hansel and Gretel, and Rumpelstiltskin weren't simply to entertain or even to terrify children. There were layers of meaning encoded into these stories, which explain things about the world which a child simply wouldn't be able to comprehend if told directly, and I don't think most adults could either. This kind of information could only be transmitted in an allegorical form, which would lay dormant during adolescence and could only be decoded by an adult mind which was looking to unlock a kind of inherited wisdom of the ages. The images and depictions in tales like Little Red Riding Hood and Goldilocks and the Three Bears provide a kind of shorthand language which we can all use as universal references. By making comparisons to public figures or contemporary events, these can help us to make sense of the world. Hans Christian Andersen wrote many of the fairy tales which we're familiar with, such as The Princess and the Pea, The Ugly Duckling, and The Emperor's New Clothes. But there's a tale I remember, which I think he wrote, that I haven't been able to find anywhere on the internet. If you're able to find it, I would be very grateful to be able to read it again in its original form. Maybe if I tell you the story, as far as I remember it anyway, you won't be surprised why it has been difficult to find. I may be taking a bit of a risk in telling you it, but I don't think there's a point in having a channel at all if I would just restrict myself to only subject matter which is safe or uncontroversial. Now, if you interpret the meaning of this story as I do, and apply it to history and current affairs in the same way, then you'll understand what a dangerously simple message it conveys. The story goes like this. There were two sleepy and gentle giants who were resting in the afternoon sunshine on a grassy hill under the shade of a tree. Now, up in the tree, above these two lazy but good-natured giants, was a goblin or a mischievous gnome, and he was cackling away to himself as he hatched a mean plan. He threw a nut, or a conker, or a pine cone perhaps, onto the head of one of the giants as he lay sleeping, and it sort of disturbed the giant in his sleep, but he kind of just brushed his face and went back to sleep. Then the gnome threw something down onto the head of the other giant, and he flinched, but he didn't fully wake up, and maybe he sighed, and he went back to sleep also. And this carried on, and he kept throwing objects down onto the heads of the giants until both of them woke up, and each of them made the assumption that the other had hit him. Immediately, because of this false assumption, the two giants started fighting each other. And up in the tree, this mischievous goblin found all of this amusing and delightful, and laughed to himself about how clever he was to have set these two giants against each other, and how stupid and blundering they were for fighting each other, and for never having looked up into the tree, or taken the time to ask the other why he had attacked him before engaging in hostilities. So, I think I'm not going to go through all the parallels we could see in history or in real life today. I think I'll just leave it like that. Sometimes, in a version of Aesop's fables, the lesson is explicitly written out for you, and other times the moral of the story is left to your own interpretation. I think the approach where you're not spoon-fed is probably better, because nobody should be told what to think of something. They should be free to interpret anything in whatever way makes sense to them. But I will say that it is unfortunately, because times are so confusing, and perhaps they've always been this way, but I do notice that a lot of people can get the wrong end of the stick, and they often misinterpret things, or maybe they latch on to an interpretation which is perhaps valid but misses a larger picture or overarching principle. And it can be a little bit frustrating when you feel like the point of something is obvious, but other people don't see it that way. But I don't know if there's anything that can or should be done about that, because if you say to somebody, hey, look, this is what this means, well then you run the risk of telling someone what to believe, or at least how they should perceive something, which kind of ruins the whole point of an allegorical story. There's no need for it then, if you would just say to somebody, hey, think this, and that would be ridiculous. So I don't like it when people tell me what to think, and therefore I shouldn't try and do it to others. I think from a moral point of view, you must draw a line between presenting information and telling people what to think about that information. And maybe that could be seen as the line between education and indoctrination. And of course, the way you present information in itself can alter the way people perceive it and form conclusions from it. I can't think of anywhere this isn't apparent in media today, but I'll have to leave a subject like that to tackle for another time.